I walked in to find my family sitting on the living room sofa. My husband, my mother, my son, and my own biological sister. What was going on? A sickening feeling settled in my gut. "Mom, sit down," my son said. "You need to accept a new reality. You are no longer the head of this family." "Aunt Serafina is," he continued, pointing at my sister. "Dad is happier with her now." I was furious. They all knew. I walked out of the room without a single word. The next day, I had 118 missed calls. But let me take you back to how this nightmare began. The wind blowing across the JFK airport tarmac that night was bone-chilling. The kind of wet, northeastern cold that seeps through your wool coat and settles deep into your joints. I had just landed after 3 grueling days in Chicago, salvaging a massive deal that my husband, Sterling, had nearly tanked with his sheer arrogance. I was exhausted, my eyes burned from sleep deprivation, and my shoulder ached from the weight of my laptop bag. All I wanted was a hot shower, a heavy pour of Cabernet, and the comfort of my own home. I wanted to tell Sterling that I had cleaned up his mess, that Vanguard Pinnacle Real Estate, the empire we had built over 22 years, was safe for the next quarter. I pulled into the sweeping driveway of our grand estate in Greenwich, Connecticut. The living room lights were blazing, casting stark golden squares onto the frost-covered lawn. Strange. Usually, the house was dead quiet by 10 p.m. Sterling would be in his study, and our 21-year-old son, Kalen, would be in his room gaming or online with his fraternity brothers. I unlocked the front door, dropping my keys into the crystal bowl on the console table. The silence that greeted me wasn't peaceful. It felt heavy, loaded with static tension like the air right before a thunderstorm. "Hello?" I called out, hanging up my coat. "Sterling, Kalen, I'm home. Aurelia?" "We're in the living room." The voice belonged to my mother, Corinne. My stomach dropped. Corinne lived 40 minutes away in Stamford. What was she doing here on a Tuesday night? Sudden panic gripped me. Something had happened. A medical emergency. I rushed into the living room, my heart hammering against my ribs. But it wasn't a medical emergency. It was a tribunal. They were all there. Sitting on the custom Italian leather sofa I had picked out last Christmas was Sterling, dressed impeccably in a crisp white dress shirt, though he refused to meet my eyes. To his left sat Corinne, her posture rigid, hands clasped tightly in her lap. To his right was Serafina, my younger sister. And in the armchair next to her, my son, Kalen. The atmosphere was suffocating. No one was crying. No one looked devastated. They looked resolute. "What is this?" I asked, my voice breathless. "Is everyone okay?" I stepped forward, but Kalen stood up. He didn't move to hug me. He stood like a bouncer blocking a doorway. He looked at me with eyes devoid of the warmth I had nurtured for 2 decades. "Mom, sit down," Kalen said. His voice was cold, an octave lower than I remembered, void of any affection. "You need to listen and not make a scene." "A scene?" "Kalen, you're scaring me. What is this?" "You need to accept a new reality," he continued, reciting words that sounded heavily rehearsed. "You are no longer the head of this family." I stared at Sterling. "Sterling, why are you just sitting there?" Sterling finally looked up. His impossibly handsome face, the face that had been the public image of our company for years, shifted into a mask of pity mixed with irritation. "It's over, Aurelia." "What's over?" "What are you talking about?" I felt like I was drowning on dry land. "Aunt Serafina," Kalen said, gesturing to my sister. "Dad is happier with her now. Unlike you, she actually understands him." The world stopped spinning. I stared at Serafina, my spoiled younger sister, whose rent I had paid for 6 years, whom I had given a fabricated job when no one else would hire her. She sat there, legs crossed, wearing a silk blouse that looked suspiciously like one missing from my own closet. And then I saw it. Sterling's hand was resting on Serafina's knee. Relaxed. Possessive. "We didn't want you to find out from strangers," Corinne chimed in. Her tone wasn't apologetic. It was a lecture. "We wanted to do this as a family." "Aurelia, you have to be realistic. You've been married to your job for years. Sterling is a man with needs. He needs a present wife, not a business partner who sleeps with her laptop. Mom, I whispered. The betrayal sliced sharper than any blade. You knew about this? You approve of this? I support happiness, Corinne said, lifting her chin defiantly. Serafina and Sterling have a connection. They love each other, Aurelia. It wasn't planned. It just happened. You can't punish them for falling in love. I looked at Serafina. She gave me a tiny, triumphant smile. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and looked down at her hand. Sparkling under the recessed lighting was a ring. The vintage Art Deco diamond ring Sterling had given me for our 20th anniversary, the one that had mysteriously vanished from my jewelry box 6 months ago. I had torn the house apart looking for it, crying for days. Sterling had told me I was careless, that I probably left it at the country club. That's my ring, I said, my voice trembling with a rage so pure it burned my throat. It looks better on her, Sterling shrugged. It was wasted on you. You never wear jewelry. We need you to pack a bag, Kaylin said, breaking the silence again. Dad is keeping the house. I'm staying here. It's best if you leave tonight. You create too much toxic energy. My son, my baby boy, whose fevers I had nursed, whose Ivy League tuition I was paying by working 80-hour weeks, was kicking me out of the home I had built. You're choosing this? I asked Kaylin, tears finally welling in my eyes. You're choosing the woman who slept with your father behind my back? She's your aunt, Kaylin. She's more than that now, Kaylin snapped. She's the only one who actually listens to me. You just throw money at me and tell me to study. Dad and Serafina treat me like an adult. I looked at the 4 of them. My husband, my sister, my mother, my son. The 4 pillars of my life. Every single one of them was rotten to the core. They hadn't just broken my heart. They had dismantled my entire existence with a cruelty that left me gasping for air. I felt violently ill, but I swallowed it down. I would not give them the satisfaction of watching me shatter. I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't beg. I straightened my spine. I locked eyes with Sterling, holding his gaze until he flinched and looked away. You think you've won? I said, my voice dangerously low. You think you can rewrite history just because you're bored and selfish? Don't make a scene, Aurelia, Serafina said, her voice sickeningly sweet. Let's be mature about this divorce. Divorce? I let out a dry, hollow laugh. Oh, you have no idea what's coming. Don't threaten us, Sterling barked, his arrogance returning. I've already spoken to the lawyers. You're locked out. The prenup, the accounts, the corporate baseline, I've handled it all. Walk out that door, Aurelia. If you refuse, I'll have a state security escort you off my property. His property? I looked around the room. I had picked every piece of furniture. I had paid for every single brick. You're trespassing now, Mom, Kaylin said. That was the final severance. I looked at my son one last time, memorizing the face of the stranger he had become. Fine, I said. I turned around. I didn't take my coat from the rack. I didn't take my keys from the bowl. I had a spare set in my pocket. I walked to the door. Where are you going? Corinne called out, a sudden note of alarm in her voice. Aurelia, we need to discuss the settlement. Sterling has a very generous offer if you sign tonight. I didn't answer. I pulled open the heavy mahogany door and stepped out into the freezing Connecticut night. The icy air hit my face, drying the tears before they could even fall. I got into my SUV, the engine roaring to life in the quiet driveway. As I backed out, I saw them in the window. They were pouring champagne. They were celebrating my eviction. I drove into the darkness, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew one thing for certain. The Aurelia they knew, the doormat, the provider, the fixer, had died in that living room. And the woman driving away was someone they should be deeply, deeply afraid of. I drove for an hour. The lights along Interstate 95 blurred into red and gold streaks across my windshield. My mind was a chaotic storm, flashing images of Serafina's smirk, the ring on her finger, Kaylin's cold eyes. But beneath the shock, a primal instinct kicked in. Survival. I needed gas. The fuel light had been on since I left the airport. I pulled off the highway into a 2 4-hour truck stop. My hands shook as I stepped out into the freezing air. I inserted my Platinum Corporate Amex, linked to our joint accounts, the one I used for everything. The screen flashed, and red letters appeared. Declined. Please see cashier. I frowned. That was impossible. The limit on that card was $250,000, and I had just cleared the balance 3 days ago. I tried again. Declined. A cold knot formed in my stomach, heavier than the betrayal. I dug into my purse and pulled out my personal debit card, linked directly to my payroll account. I walked into the neon-lit convenience store. The bored teenager behind the counter didn't even look up as I placed a bottle of water and a pack of gum next to the register. I swiped the debit card. Declined, he mumbled, popping a bubble. Try it again, I said, my voice tight. There are funds in there. He sighed and ran it again. Still declined, lady. Insufficient funds or account, frozen. You got cash? I stood frozen under the harsh fluorescent lights. My banking app. I had to check it. My fingers fumbled as I opened my phone and tried to log in. Access denied. User authentication error. Please contact your branch. I tried logging into the corporate accounts. Access denied. Sterling hadn't just kicked me out of the house. He had triggered a financial kill switch. He had planned this meticulously. You can't just lock a co-owner out of business and personal accounts overnight unless you've laid the groundwork with the banks, claiming fraudulent activity or altering administrative rights days in advance. He wanted me penniless. He wanted me stranded in the middle of the night with zero resources, so I would come crawling back and sign whatever generous offer Corinne had mentioned. I dug through the bottom of my designer tote, past useless receipts, and found 3 crumpled $20 bills and a $10, $70. That was my entire net worth at this moment. I paid for the gas and water in cash and walked back to the car, shivering, not just from the cold, but from the terrifying realization of my vulnerability. I couldn't go to a hotel. I had no credit card for the deposit. I couldn't go to my mother's. I drove until I found a seedy roadside motel with a flickering neon sign that read, Vacancy. The kind of place long-haul truckers used for a few hours of sleep, where the sheets smelled of stale smoke and regret. Payment up front, the night manager said, through bulletproof glass. $60. I slid 3 20s under the slot. He pushed a brass key back. Room 12. The room was freezing. The ancient heater rattled, blowing out air that smelled like burning dust. I sat on the edge of the sagging mattress, still wearing my tailored business suit, my wool coat wrapped tightly around me. I checked my phone. The screen lit up with notifications. No apologies. No please come back. Just emails. Subject: Marital Settlement Agreement. Subject: Urgent. NDA required. Subject: Notice of termination. Vanguard Pinnacle Real Estate. I opened the termination notice first. It was a PDF sent by our head of HR, a woman I had personally recruited and mentored. Dear Aurelia, it read, effective immediately, your position as Chief Operating Officer has been terminated with cause, citing allegations of corporate espionage and gross negligence. I laughed. A harsh, grating sound in the empty room. Espionage? Negligence? I was the one up at 3 a.m. auditing the ledgers. I was the one who knew every zoning loophole in the tri-state area. Sterling didn't even know how to convert a Word document to a PDF without my help. Then a text came through from Kaylin. My thumb hovered over the screen. Some stupid, maternal part of me hoped he had changed his mind. That he was sorry. Kaylin. Mom, don't make this difficult. Dad said he'll cut off my trust fund and tuition if you fight the divorce. He promised me the VP of Acquisitions spot next year if I stick with him. You always taught me to be ambitious. I'm just doing what you taught me. Please understand. I dropped the phone onto the bed like it had burned me. That was the final piece. Sterling hadn't just taken my money and my job. He had weaponized the very wealth I helped create to bribe my own son against me. I curled up on the scratchy bedspread, pulling my knees to my chest. The tears finally came, hot and heavy. I cried for the little boy I used to read bedtime stories to. I cried for the sister I used to protect on the playground. I cried for the husband I trusted when he was nothing but a cheap suit and a good smile. But as the night wore on and the tears dried into salt on my cheeks, Something else began to settle in my chest. Cold and heavy, like a stone. They thought they had erased me. They thought by taking my cards and my passwords, they had taken my power. They forgot one crucial detail. They forgot who actually built the castle they were sitting in. They forgot who designed the security systems, who drafted the contracts, and who knew exactly where all the bodies were buried. Sterling thought Vanguard Pinnacle ran on his charm. He was about to find out it ran on my brain. And while he might have changed the locks on the front door, he forgot that the architect always builds a back door. I stared at the water stain on the motel ceiling, waiting for the sun to rise. I was no longer Aurelia the wife. I was no longer Aurelia the mother. I was Aurelia the architect, and I was going to burn their house to the ground. Sleep was impossible. The roar of the highway was a constant drone, but it was the noise in my own head that kept me awake. Sharp, jagged memories replayed on a loop. To understand why I was lying on a filthy mattress with $10 to my name, I had to look back. I had to look at the foundation of my life and admit that it had been cracked from the start. I grew up in a modest suburb in New Jersey, the older of two girls. My father died when I was 7, leaving my mother, Corinne, to raise us alone. His death broke something in her, or maybe it just revealed who she truly was. She was a woman who needed to be adored, to be the center of attention, and she projected that need onto her daughters, or rather, onto one of them. Serafina was born beautiful. She had cascading blonde hair, massive blue eyes, and a smile that made strangers stop in the grocery store. I was plain, mousy, brown hair, serious eyes, a sturdy build. I was the responsible one. Serafina was the princess. I remember my 18th birthday. I had just received my acceptance letter to NYU's Stern School of Business, along with a partial scholarship. It was my ticket out. I had worked 3 jobs during high school tutoring, waitressing, stacking library books to save up the rest of the tuition. I ran into the kitchen, waving the letter. "Mom, I got in!" Corinne was at the table, painting 12-year-old Serafina's nails. "That's nice, Aurelia," my mother said, not looking up. "Keep your voice down, Serafina has a headache." "But Mom, it's NYU. Business." Corinne sighed, finally looking at me. Her eyes weren't filled with pride, they were calculating. "Aurelia, honey, we need to talk about that money you've been saving. My college fund." See, Serafina was just scouted. "There's a massive teen pageant out in Los Angeles next month. It could be her big break. But the entry fees, the flights, the headshots, it's expensive." My heart plummeted. "Mom, that's my tuition. I worked for that." "You're being so selfish, Aurelia," Serafina whined, blowing on her wet nails. "Don't you want me to be famous? I'll buy you a car when I'm rich." "Aurelia," my mother said, using that tone. The tone that weaponized guilt. "You're strong. You're smart. You'll always figure it out. You can work another year. Take night classes at the community college." "But Serafina, she's fragile. This is her dream. You wouldn't crush your sister's dream, would you? Family sacrifices for each other." I caved. "I gave them the money." "Of course I did. I had been conditioned for 18 years to believe my worth lay entirely in what I could provide. I was the workhorse, the mule, the fixer. Serafina was the golden child who deserved to shine. Serafina went to LA. She didn't get discovered. She spent the money on designer clothes and trips to Disneyland. I spent the next year working double shifts at a diner to earn the money back. I started college a year late, exhausted but determined. That dynamic never changed. It only evolved. When I graduated summa cum laude, my mother didn't attend because Serafina was having a severe panic attack over a 2-week-old breakup. I walked across the stage alone. When I got my first massive promotion at a top financial consulting firm in Manhattan, my mother said, "That's great, honey. Listen, can you lend Serafina $5,000? Her landlord is being entirely unreasonable." I paid Serafina's rent. I paid for her car repairs. I paid for acting classes she never attended. I bought my mother a condo so she wouldn't have to worry about stairs. I thought I was buying their love. I thought if I gave enough, worked enough, fixed enough, they would eventually look at me the way they looked at Serafina. I thought one day my mother would say, "I'm so proud of you. Aurelia, but I was never her joy. I was her utility bill. I was the safety net. And then I met Sterling. He was charming, ambitious, and he seemed to actually see me. He told me I was brilliant. He told me I was beautiful. I didn't realize then that he possessed the same calculating eyes as my mother. He didn't see a soulmate. He saw a resource. He saw a woman conditioned to give everything and ask for nothing in return. He fit perfectly into the vacuum my family had carved out in my heart. Lying in that dark motel room, the realization hit me with physical force. I hadn't escaped my family dynamic by marrying Sterling. I had recreated it. Sterling was the new golden child, demanding adoration and resources. I was still the workhorse, toiling in the shadows to keep the lights on. And Serafina was just the inevitable conclusion. The two parasites in my life had finally found each other. You're strong, Aurelia. My mother's voice echoed in my head. Well, she was right about one thing. I was strong. Strong enough to carry them for decades. And now, God help them, I was strong enough to let go. I sat up, the metal springs creaking. I wasn't going to cry anymore. The grief was gone, replaced by a cold, clinical clarity. They wanted the fragile Serafina? They wanted the dreamer Sterling? Fine, they could have each other. But they couldn't have my money. They couldn't have my company. I reached for my laptop bag. It was time to stop being the sacrificial daughter. It was time to be the COO, liquidating toxic assets. The morning sun filtered through the grimy motel curtains. I booted up my laptop. Thank God I had a portable Wi-Fi hotspot in my bag, a habit from years of business travel. Sterling couldn't turn off a device he didn't know existed. I didn't try the bank accounts again. I knew the front doors were locked. Instead, I opened a hidden folder. To understand how I was going to destroy Sterling, you have to understand how I built him. I met Sterling 22 years ago at a commercial real estate expo at the Javits Center. He was 29, wearing an ill-fitting suit, holding a cheap glass of wine, and mesmerizing a group of investors. He had a smile that could sell ice to Eskimos, a laugh that made you feel like the funniest person in the room. I was 25, a junior analyst holding my market research binders. I watched him work the room. He was charismatic, yes, but I could hear what he was pitching. He was using buzzwords, promising returns that were mathematically impossible. He approached me by the buffet. You look like you're analyzing the structural integrity of that shrimp cocktail, he joked. No, I smiled. I'm analyzing your pitch to those investors. You're promising a 15% ROI on properties in a declining zone. You're going to bankrupt them. He blinked, surprised, then laughed. Okay, you got me. I'm a big picture guy, not a numbers guy. I need someone who understands the boring stuff. The boring stuff is what keeps you out of federal prison, I said flatly. He fell in love with me, or at least with what I could do for him. 6 months later, we were married. A year after that, we founded Vanguard Pinnacle Real Estate. The division of labor was instantaneous. Sterling was the face. He was the CEO. He took the clients to steakhouses, played golf with developers, gave interviews to Forbes and Bloomberg. He loved the spotlight. I was the architect. I was the COO. But in reality, I was everything. I scouted the properties, negotiated the corporate loans, wrangled the contractors, fought city councils for zoning permits, and handled all taxes, payroll, and legal compliance. Our first major project almost ruined us. Sterling bought an old warehouse in Brooklyn, convinced it was the next big luxury loft conversion. He overpaid by $2 million. The general contractor he hired took the deposit and vanished. We were on the verge of bankruptcy. I remember sitting at our dining table, 6 months pregnant with Kaylin, staring at the red numbers. Sterling was pacing, sweating, panicking. We're ruined, Aurelia. My reputation is dead. I'm going to be sued. Sit down, I commanded. I took my grandmother's jewelry, my only inheritance, the only thing safe from my mother and sister, and I sold it. I liquidated my 401. I renegotiated with the banks, presenting a business plan so bulletproof the branch manager said it was the best he'd ever seen. I fired Sterling's incompetent friends, became the project manager, and walked the construction site in a hard hat and steel-toed boots while heavily pregnant. We finished the project. It sold out in 3 weeks. Sterling was hailed as a visionary in the real estate media. The headlines read, Sterling Croft, the new king of NY real estate. He brought the magazine home, beaming. Look at this. Babe, we made it. He didn't mention my name once in the interview. When I gently pointed it out, he kissed my forehead. Honey, you know the media. They like a simple narrative. Besides, you hate the spotlight. You're my secret weapon. The power behind the throne. I accepted it. I told myself it was for the family. For 20 years, I was the fool building the stage, rigging the lights, and writing the script, while Sterling just walked out and took the applause. The company grew into a multi-hundred-million-dollar empire, but the corporate structure was my masterpiece. Sterling was lazy with details. He hated reading contracts. He hated passwords. You handle it, Aurelia, was his favorite phrase. So, I set up the digital infrastructure. I created the complex web of LLCs to limit liability. And because Sterling was paranoid about corporate espionage, he insisted on highly encrypted, localized internal servers for our most sensitive financial data. I want a ghost access, he had demanded years ago. A master admin login that overrides all protocols in case we get locked out by our own IT guys. Only you and I will know it. But Sterling never bothered to memorize the 6-4-character alphanumeric string I generated. He wrote it on a post-it, left it in his drawer for a week, and then threw it away, assuming I would always be there to type it in for him. He was right. I was always there. Until last night. Now, in the motel room, I pulled up the VPN tunnel to Vanguard Pinnacle's private servers. Sterling thought that by calling the bank and removing me as a signatory, he had cut me off. He thought by having HR fire me, he revoked my access. He relied on the front door. He forgot about the ghost. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I typed the string of characters a line from my favorite poem mixed with the GPS coordinates of our first building and the date Kalen lost his first tooth. Things Sterling would never know. Authenticating. Access. Granted. Administrator level. The screen bloomed with data. The entire nervous system of Vanguard Pinnacle lay bare before me. Emails, wire transfers, shadow ledgers, tax filings, private messages. I wasn't just looking at a company. I was looking at the crime scene of my marriage. I started downloading. I didn't just want some files. I wanted everything. Every email Sterling sent over the last 5 years. Every expense report. Every wire transfer to offshore accounts. And then I saw it. A hidden folder labeled Project S. Swasn't a construction site. Swas Serafina. I opened the folder, and my blood ran ice cold. This wasn't just an affair. This was massive. Systemic embezzlement. Date. Jan 12. Wire transfer. $50,000 to Serafina Consulting LLC. Memo. Retainer. Date. Feb Pais Brazecha. Chinsis Brazecha. 0 to Cartier. Date. March 1. $12,000 for a luxury suite monthly lease at the Street Regis. He had been funding his mistress using corporate money for 3 years. But it went deeper. I saw transfers to a shell company I didn't recognize. Serafina Zenith LLC. The signatory wasn't Sterling. It was Serafina. And the assets being transferred weren't just cash. They were property deeds. Sterling had been quietly transferring the deeds of our most valuable, debt-free commercial properties into my sister's shell company. He was hollowing out Vanguard Pinnacle, preparing to leave me with an empty husk while he and Serafina walked away with the prime real estate. I felt physically sick. This was grand larceny. But as I scanned the documents, a cold smile touched my lips. Sterling was an actor, not an architect. He didn't understand the paperwork he was filing. In their arrogance and greed, he and Serafina had made sloppy, amateur mistakes. They had forged my signature on the property transfer documents. I could see it on the PDFs, a clumsy digital clone of my signature ripped from a different file. And on the incorporation papers for Serafina Zenith LLC, Serafina had listed her permanent address. It was my address. The house I paid for. I had them dead to rights. But I couldn't go to the police right now. If I did, Sterling would claim it was an administrative error, pay a fine, and bury me in litigation for years with expensive lawyers while I had $70. I didn't need them to just hang themselves. I needed them to feel safe. I needed them to think I was utterly defeated, bankrupt, and hiding in a hole. I closed the laptop. I had the blueprint for their destruction. Now I just needed to build the trap. The digital evidence of Project S burned in my mind, forcing me to recall exactly how Serafina had slithered her way into my sanctuary. It started 5 years ago. Vanguard was expanding rapidly, and my guard was down. Serafina had just gone through her third divorce. Her ex-husband, a hard-working mechanic named Dax, had finally left her because she refused to work and maxed out his credit cards on designer bags. She showed up at my door with 2 suitcases and an Oscar-worthy sob story. "He was abusive, Aurelia," she sobbed, throwing herself into my arms. I later learned abusive meant he cut up her credit cards. I have nowhere to go. "Mom said you'd help me," Corinne called 10 minutes later. "Aurelia, your house is massive. Let your sister stay in a guest room. She just needs to get back on her feet." Family helps family. I agreed. I always agreed. 1 week turned into 6 months. Serafina spent her days lounging by my pool, drinking my wine, and criticizing my landscapers. Sterling, at the time, seemed genuinely annoyed by her. "She's a leech, Aurelia," he complained. "She treats our house like a resort." I defended her. "She's hurting, Sterling. Give her time." Then came the request. "I need a job." Serafina announced at dinner one night. "I'm bored. I want to work for Vanguard." I nearly choked on my water. "Serafina, we run a high-pressure commercial real estate firm." "What skills do you have for that?" "I'm a people person," she insisted. "I can do PR, client relations. I can plan the corporate parties. You guys are too stiff. You need someone fun." "No," I said. It was one of the few times I put my foot down. But Corinne intervened. She drove all the way from Stamford just to have coffee with me. "Aurelia, this is a chance for Serafina to learn responsibility. If you don't give her a job, she'll just float around forever. Give her a salary. Let her get her own place." "Sterling thinks it's a great idea, too," Corinne added smoothly. I blinked. "Sterling? You talked to him?" "He thinks Serafina could help soften the company's image," Corinne said. "You know you can be a bit intense, darling." I asked Sterling that night. "You want to hire her?" He shrugged, adjusting his tie. "Your mother's right. We need someone to handle the fluff, the galas, the charity dinners. You hate doing that stuff. Pay her an assistant's salary. Get her out of the house. Win-win." So I did. I created the position of Director of Special Events. Initially, it seemed to work. Serafina moved into an apartment I subsidized. She threw the corporate Christmas party. It was wildly over budget, but a success. Then the subtle shifts began. Serafina started coming to the office every day, dressing in outfits that were definitely not business appropriate. She would spend hours in Sterling's office with the door closed, allegedly discussing event logistics. I would walk past and hear them laughing. Whenever I walked in, they would fall silent. "What's so funny?" I'd ask, feeling a prick of unease. "Just an inside joke with a client." Serafina would smile, that sickeningly sweet smile. "You wouldn't get it, Aurelia. It's PR stuff." She started joining us for business lunches. Then, she started replacing me at them. "Aurelia, you stay and finish the quarterly projections," Sterling would say. "Serafina and I will take the developers to the steakhouse. You hate small talk anyway." I did hate small talk. I loved the work. So I let them go. I stayed in the office, eating a sad salad at my desk, crunching numbers, ensuring our profit margins were flawless, while my husband and my sister drank martinis on my dime. I noticed changes in Sterling. He started dressing younger. He bought a Porsche he didn't need. He started having networking dinners that went late into the night. When I voiced my concerns, Corinne gaslit me into oblivion. "You are being paranoid, Aurelia," she scolded. "You should be thrilled Sterling and Serafina get along. Most men hate their in-laws. Don't ruin this with your jealousy. It's beneath you." Jealousy. She made me feel like an insecure, crazy woman. Now, Staring at the Project S folder, I saw the absolute truth. The networking dinners were dates. The business trips to Los Angeles were romantic getaways. And the consulting fees paid to Serafina were her allowance for being his whore. The snake hadn't just slithered into the grass. I was the one who opened the door, invited it in, and gave it a bowl of warm milk. And worst of all, my mother had held the door open. Corinne had been the facilitator. She had pushed Serafina towards Sterling, knowing exactly what Serafina was capable of. She wanted Serafina to have the life I had built, because in her twisted mind, the golden child deserved the kingdom, and I was just the mason destined to build it and be banished. I slammed my fist onto the cheap motel desk. The physical pain grounded me. "All right," I whispered to the empty room. "You want to play the fun, irresponsible visionaries? Let's see how fun it is when the architect removes the load-bearing walls." For the next 6 hours, I was in a state of forensic accounting flow. Ghost access gave me everything. But I had to be careful. If I altered a single file, the system logs might alert our IT director, a guy who had been loyal to me but was now legally taking orders from Sterling. So, I remained a ghost. I copied, downloaded, screenshotted, and traced the money flow. It was worse than I thought. Vanguard Pinnacle was bleeding cash to fund their lifestyle and the transfers to Serafina Zenith LLC. Sterling had stopped paying vendors. We were 3 months behind on payments to the construction crews for our new skyscraper in Hudson Yards. We had defaulted on interest payments for 2 massive corporate loans. Sterling was robbing Peter to pay Paul. My company, my life's work, was a house of cards. If the creditors found out, we would be bankrupt in 30 days. But then, I found something that made me sit up straight. It was an email chain between Sterling and a private investigator from Blackwood Investigations, dated 2 years ago. Subject: surveillance. Sterling: I need dirt. Infidelity, substance abuse, mental instability, anything. I need cause to invalidate the prenup. Blackwood: Mr. Croft, we've tailed her for 6 months. She goes to the office. She goes to Whole Foods. She visits your mother-in-law. She works late. There is no dirt. The woman is a saint. Sterling: try harder or make it up. I can't afford to give her half. I stopped breathing. 2 years. He had been planning to discard me for 2 years, but couldn't find a way to do it without losing his fortune. Then, a more recent email, dated 1 week ago. Sterling: forget the dirt. We're going with the mental instability angle. Her family will testify. Her mother and sister are on board. We'll claim she's overworked, paranoid, unfit to lead. We'll trigger a vote of no confidence with the board. Once she's out, we trigger the buyout clause at rock-bottom valuation. Corinne: I can testify that she's been acting erratic lately. Very emotional. I'm worried about her, Sterling. We have to do what's best for the company. I stared at the screen. Tears of sheer, unadulterated rage blurred my vision. My mother. My own mother had conspired to have me declared mentally unfit so her golden child could steal my husband and my money. You want unstable? I muttered. I'll give you an earthquake. I dug deeper. I needed leverage. The embezzlement was great, but proving it in court took time. I needed something immediate, something that would put the fear of God into Sterling. I found it in last year's tax filings and loan applications. To secure a massive bridge loan from a private equity firm, Sterling had inflated the occupancy rates of our commercial properties. He had fabricated lease agreements. He had physically forged the signatures of non-existent tenants. This wasn't civil fraud. This was federal wire and bank fraud, carrying mandatory federal prison time. And the loan documents were signed by Sterling Croft, CEO. My signature was nowhere near it. I had been away for my aunt's funeral that week, a funeral Corinne and Serafina skipped, and Sterling said he'd handle the paperwork. He had signed his own death warrant and didn't even know it. I copied the loan documents. I copied the forged leases. I compiled a dossier that was the legal equivalent of a nuclear bomb. I checked the time. It was noon. I had been working non-stop for 12 hours. I was starving, unwashed, and running on pure adrenaline. I needed a burner phone. I couldn't use my personal cell. They might track it or pull records. I walked to a drugstore across the street, bought a cheap prepaid smartphone with cash, and walked back. Sitting on the bed, I stared at the burner. Who could I call? My friends were mostly mutual friends with Sterling. They would likely side with the charismatic CEO or stay neutral. My family was out. My employees were too risky to involve right now. I needed someone powerful, someone who hated Sterling, someone with the resources to go to war. One name came to mind: Silas Hawthorne. Silas was a billionaire real estate tycoon in New York. Old money, ruthless, but fiercely principled. 3 years ago, Sterling had beaten Silas out of a highly coveted development plot in Hudson Yards. Sterling won by bribing a city zoning official, a move I had vehemently opposed, but Sterling executed behind my back. Silas suspected foul play and had publicly called Sterling a glorified used car salesman in a cheap suit. Sterling laughed it off, but Silas never forgot. Going to Silas Hawthorne with proof of Sterling's fraud, especially the fraud that cost Silas, that specific deal was a massive risk. Silas could laugh in my face. He could throw me out. But he was the only man in New York with enough power to shield me from Sterling's legal team. I dialed the number for Hawthorne Enterprises. I knew it by heart. I had researched him extensively when we were competitors. Hawthorne Enterprises. Chairman's office. A crisp voice answered. I need to speak to Mr. Hawthorne immediately. Mr. Hawthorne is in a meeting. May I ask what this is regarding? Tell him it's Aurelia Croft, I said. Tell him I know exactly how Sterling Croft got the Hudson Yards zoning variance. And tell him I have the wire transfers to prove it. There was a brief pause. Hold, please. 30 seconds later, a low, gravelly voice came on the line. Mrs. Croft, to what do I owe the pleasure? Did your husband send you to gloat? My husband just fired me, emptied my bank accounts, and moved his mistress into my bed, I said, my voice deadpan. I'm not here to gloat, Mr. Hawthorne. I'm here to burn his empire to the ground. I thought you might want to bring the marshmallows. Silence. Then, a dark chuckle. I'm listening. Before meeting Silas Hawthorne, there was one more wound I had to cauterize, a file I had been avoiding in the Vanguard database. Kalen's trust fund. Kalen was my weak spot, my Achilles heel. I had shielded him from Sterling's narcissism his entire life. When Sterling forgot Kalen's birthday, I bought the gift and signed Sterling's name. When Sterling missed Kalen's lacrosse games, I told Kalen his father was working hard for our future. I raised him to believe his dad was a hero, hiding the reality that his father was a negligent egomaniac. Now I realized it was my greatest mistake. I had protected Kalen from the truth. And by doing so, I allowed Sterling to buy his loyalty with lies. I opened the trust fund documents. Sterling had recently altered the terms. Originally, the fund was set to disperse at age 25, conditional on college graduation. The new terms, dated 2 weeks ago, accelerated cash disbursement of $1 million. Transfer of title, 2023 Porsche 911. Attached was an email chain. Kalen, Dad, Mom is gonna flip if I drop out next semester. Sterling. Your mother won't be in charge much longer, Kay. She treats you like a kid. I treat you like a man. You want the car? You want the cash? You just need to back me up when the time comes. Tell the lawyers she's acting crazy. Unstable. Kalen. I mean, she has been super stressed lately. You're right. She's losing it. We gotta protect the company. Sterling. Exactly. You stick with me. I make you VP of Acquisitions next year. No degree needed. You learn on the job, like I did. Kalen, VP? Seriously? Okay, I'm in. What do I do? I read those words, and my heart didn't just break, it turned to ash. VP of Acquisitions? Kalen had failed intro to macroeconomics. He spent his weekends playing Call of Duty and sleeping until noon. He wasn't qualified to run a lemonade stand, let alone a department at a billion-dollar firm. Sterling was setting him up, stroking his ego to use him as a pawn against me. And Kalen, my sweet boy, had sold his mother out for a Porsche and a fake title. I remembered his text from last night. Dad said he'll cut off my tuition. He wasn't worried about his education. He was worried about the easy money. I pulled up Kalen's credit card statements, the ones I paid for. High-end liquor stores, VIP tables at Manhattan clubs, online crypto casinos, OnlyFans charges. He was spiraling, and instead of parenting him, Sterling was funding the spiral to buy an ally. I picked up the burner phone, hesitating. He was my son. But the boy sitting on that sofa, telling me to accept reality, wasn't the boy I raised. He was his father's creation. If I kept catching him when he fell, I would lose him forever to Sterling's world of corruption and shallowness. The only way to truly save him was to let him hit the ground. I typed out a text. I didn't send it. I just wrote it, staring at the blinking cursor. Kaylin, I saw the emails. I saw the car. You chose the easy road. But the easy road is a trap. When your father is done using you, he will discard you just like he discarded me. I love you enough to let you learn this the hard way. Good luck, Mr. Vice President. I saved it to drafts. I wiped my eyes. I logged into the corporate payroll system. I deleted Kaylin from the intern roster he had been on for 3 years, despite never showing up. I couldn't touch the trust fund, Sterling controlled that now, but I could touch the health insurance. Kaylin was on my premium corporate plan, which I paid for out of pocket. Remove dependent. Kaylin Croft. Reason: no longer a full-time student. It was petty, it was small, but it was the first time in 21 years I didn't fix something for him. My burner phone buzzed. It was an address from Silas Hawthorne. The Union Club. Library. 1 hour. Come alone. I closed the laptop, walked into the dingy bathroom, and splashed freezing water on my face. I tried to smooth my hair. My tailored suit was hopelessly wrinkled, but I dusted it off. I applied a coat of dark red lipstick. I looked in the cracked mirror. The woman staring back looked exhausted, yes, but she looked dangerous. She looked like a mother who had lost her child and had absolutely nothing left to lose. You want unstable, Sterling, I said to my reflection. I'll give you a Category 5 hurricane. I walked into the Union Club in the same wrinkled suit I had fled my house in, carrying a laptop bag containing enough evidence to send my husband to federal prison. The doorman eyed me skeptically. The place smelled of old money, old grudges, and polished mahogany, the world ruled by men like Silas Hawthorne. I found him in the library, sitting in a high-backed leather wing chair, reading the Wall Street Journal. He was 65, with thick silver hair and eyes like polished flint. He didn't stand when I approached. Mrs. Croft, Silas said, folding his paper. You look terrible. I feel terrible, I admitted, sitting in the chair opposite him. You mentioned the Hudson Yards deal, Silas cut to the chase. You said you have proof. I opened my laptop. I didn't waste time on pleasantries. I pulled up the dossier I had built in the motel room and turned the screen toward him. 3 years ago, Sterling beat you out for the Hudson Yards plot. You suspected he bribed the zoning commissioner, Marcus Thorne. You were right. Silas leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. These are the wire transfers, I said, pointing at the screen. $450,000 to a shell company called Thorne Management LLC. And here's the email chain between Sterling and Marcus discussing the fee for an expedited zoning variance. Sterling was sloppy. He used his personal email for the initial contact. Silas studied the documents. His expression was unreadable, but the air around him seemed to drop 10 degrees. Why are you showing me this now? You were the COO. You profited from this deal. I didn't know about it, I said, my voice dead flat. Sterling kept a shadow ledger. I found it last night, after he threw me out of my own house, froze my bank accounts, and moved his mistress into my bed. Silas looked up, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. His mistress? My sister, I corrected, cheered on by my mother. A bitter laugh escaped my lips. It was a massive family reunion. I was the only one not invited. I took a breath. Mr. Hawthorne, I am not here to gossip. I am here to make a deal. Sterling is trying to destroy me. He has forged my signature on fraudulent federal loans. He is embezzling corporate funds. He is going to crash Vanguard Pinnacle. And you want me to save it? Silas raised an eyebrow. I want you to help me bury him. And in return, I will hand you the Hudson Yards plot on a silver platter. Go on. Sterling is over-leveraged and bleeding cash. He is about to default on his construction loans. If you step in right now as a white knight, offering a bridge loan to save his projects, he will take it. He's desperate. And in the loan agreement, we bury a collateral clause. When he defaults, and he will, Because I know the real numbers, you get his assets. Specifically, the deed to the Hudson Yards plot. Silas stared at me for a long time. The silence was thick and electric. Then, a slow, terrifying smile spread across his face. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of an apex predator recognizing another. "You're a vindictive woman, aren't you?" Silas said softly. "I'm an effective woman," I corrected. "Sterling thinks I'm a scorned, hysterical housewife who's going to cry in a corner. He doesn't realize I'm the one who wrote his playbook." Silas closed my laptop and pushed it back toward me. "I like you, Aurelia. You have steel. I always thought Sterling was a peacock, lots of feathers, couldn't fly. But you're a hawk." He pulled out his phone. "I'm calling my lead counsel, Channing Brooks. He's the most vicious litigation attorney in Manhattan. He will represent you in the divorce. Pro bono. Consider it an investment in our new partnership." "Thank you," I whispered, a wave of relief washing over me. "And Aurelia," Silas added, his eyes sharp. "Do not disappoint me. If we do this, we crush him completely. No mercy." "He won't just cry," I said, remembering Sterling's smirk as he took my ring. "He's going to bleed." Silas nodded. "Good. Now let's get you a suite at a hotel that doesn't charge by the hour. You can't plan a war if you haven't slept." That night, I slept in a suite at the Waldorf Astoria, paid for by Hawthorne Enterprises. I took a scalding shower, scrubbing the motel grime from my skin. Lying between crisp, clean sheets, I felt a profound tectonic shift inside myself. For 20 years, I was the fixer. I smoothed over Sterling's mistakes, cleaned up his messes, made him look good. I was the invisible glue holding everything together. Now, I was going to be the solvent. I was going to dissolve everything he thought he owned. I picked up my burner phone and sent a one-word text to Silas. "Ready." 3 days later, the trap was set. Channing Brooks, Silas's terrifyingly calm lawyer, drafted the marital settlement agreement. It was a masterpiece of legal deception. On the surface, it looked like total surrender on my part. The terms: Sterling retains the Greenwich estate. Sterling retains 100% ownership of Vanguard Pinnacle Real Estate. Aurelia receives a one-time cash buyout of $3 million, a fraction of what I was truly owed. Aurelia waives all claims to future alimony. It looked like I was giving up. It looked like I was broken, desperate for cash, and just wanted to run away. Sterling would love it. It played perfectly to his ego. But buried deep within the 60-page document, in Section 14, Subsection B, Clause 4, was the poison pill. In the event that either party to this agreement is found to have engaged in undisclosed criminal activity, federal fraud, or embezzlement during the course of the marriage, or is indicted for a federal felony within 24 months of signing, this agreement shall be rendered null and void in its entirety. In such event, 100% of the marital and corporate assets, including all shares of Vanguard Pinnacle LLC and real property, shall revert to the innocent party as punitive damages. Sterling never read the fine print. He paid lawyers to do that. But his lawyer, Preston Vance, was lazy. I knew that because I used to audit his exorbitant invoices. Preston would scan the contract for the big numbers, the buyout, the alimony waiver. He wouldn't look for a highly specific reversion clause buried in boilerplate liability jargon. I met Sterling and his lawyer at Preston's Midtown office. I wore no makeup. I wore an oversized, drab sweater. I kept my head down, my eyes on the floor. I had to sell the image of the defeated woman. Sterling walked in like he owned the world, wearing a custom Tom Ford suit, smelling of expensive cologne. A gift from Serafina? Probably. Well, look who crawled out of her hole. Sterling smirked, sitting down. Hope you're ready to sign, Aurelia. Serafina and I have wedding venues to book. Just give me the check, I said, making my voice tremble. I just want to be done. Sterling, I can't fight you anymore. Sterling laughed, looking at Preston. See? I told you she'd fold. She doesn't have the stomach for a fight. Preston slid the paperwork across the polished mahogany table. Standard settlement, Aurelia. You walk away with $3 million and a clean slate. Sign here, here, and here. I picked up the pen. My hand shook, partly acting, partly pure adrenaline. What about Kaylin? I asked quietly. Kaylin's staying with me, Sterling said, leaning back in his chair, practically glowing with triumph. He's my VP now. We're going to build the empire together. I felt a sharp pain in my chest, but I swallowed it down. Okay. Take care of him. Just sign the damn papers, Aurelia. I signed my name on the lines that ostensibly signed away 20 years of my blood, sweat, and tears. Then, Sterling signed. He did it with a massive, arrogant flourish. Done, Preston said, closing the folder. The funds will be wired to your new account tomorrow. Sterling stood up and buttoned his jacket. He gave me a look that made my skin crawl. You know, Aurelia, you should thank me. You were always too stiff for this life. Go live in a cabin somewhere. Find a nice librarian. Goodbye, Sterling, I whispered. As I walked to the elevator, I could hear Sterling laughing with Preston. That was easier than I thought. She didn't even ask for the Hamptons house. The elevator doors closed, cutting off his laughter. I leaned against the metal wall and let out a long, slow exhale. He signed it. The poison pill was active. Now, all I had to do was prove the fraud. And I already had the proof. I just needed the right stage to present it. And what better stage than a wedding? Sterling and Serafina announced the date. 3 weeks from now. A shotgun, high society wedding. They wanted to legitimize their relationship before the New York winter social season began. 3 weeks was my deadline. I walked out of the building and got into Silas Hawthorne's waiting town car. Did he sign? Silas asked from the shadows of the back seat. He signed, I said, a genuine, terrifying smile finally breaking across my face. He thinks he bought my silence for $3 million. He just signed away his entire life. Silas poured me a glass of sparkling water. To the architect. To the demolition, I replied. The next 3 weeks were an exercise in masochism. I had to remain entirely invisible while Sterling and Serafina flaunted their victory all over Manhattan. I rented a small, inconspicuous apartment in Brooklyn under a fake name. I spent my days with Silas's forensic accountants, building the case. We turned the raw data I had stolen into a legal sledgehammer. Every night, I tortured myself by checking social media. Serafina's Instagram was a volcanic eruption of vulgar wealth. A photo of a brand new Mercedes convertible. Hubby's spoiling me. Number blessed number new beginnings. A photo of my dining room, newly decorated with hideous gold wallpaper. Out with the old boring trash. Making this house my own. It felt like watching someone erase my existence from my own life. But the most painful post was from my mother. Corinne posted a picture of the three of them, Sterling, Serafina, and herself holding champagne flutes at Le Bernardin. The caption, "Finally, a family that knows how to enjoy life. So proud of my beautiful daughter and my incredible son-in-law. True love always wins. True love." She had sold her eldest daughter down the river for a seat at the cool kids' table. And Kaylin was silent on social media, but I could see the credit card alerts on a secondary account I still monitored that Sterling hadn't found. One Oak nightclub. $5,000. Soho House. $2,000. NYPD bail bonds. $3,500. My son was in freefall. Sterling wasn't parenting him. He was enabling his destruction. I wanted to rush in and save him. But Silas stopped me. "You can't save a drowning man who doesn't want the life preserver, Aurelia," he said gently. He chose his side. Let him see what that side actually looks like when the lights go out. I knew he was right, but it felt like amputating a limb. Meanwhile, Vanguard Pinnacle was rotting from the inside. My spies Sarah in accounting and Ricky in project management gave me daily reports. "Sterling hasn't been in the office past 2 p.m. in weeks," Sarah texted. "He's letting Serafina plan a rebranding. She wants to change the corporate logo to rose gold and pink. Rose gold. For a commercial real estate firm? The contractors are threatening a walkout at Hudson Yards," Ricky reported. "Sterling told them the checks are in the mail." They aren't. He used the construction escrow to pay for the wedding venue. "Let it burn," I told them. "Just document everything. Save the emails where he tells you to delay payments." The wedding was going to be at the Street Regis, New York, in the Grand Ballroom. It was one of the most expensive venues in the city. Serafina had invited 300 people investors, local politicians, society elites. They wanted to cement their status as New York's new power couple. They needed an audience. Perfect, I thought, looking at the invitation Sarah had smuggled to me. You want a spectacle? I'll give you a spectacle. 2 days before the wedding, I received my final trump card. It came from an unexpected source. My burner phone rang. Blocked number. Hello? Aurelia. It's Dax. Dax. Serafina's ex-husband. The mechanic she had bled dry. Dax, I said, stunned. How are you? I'm fine. Listen, I heard what went down. What they did to you is disgusting. Dax's voice was rough. I have something. When Serafina left me, she left a box of old paperwork in the garage. I was gonna burn it, but I went through it last night. Aurelia. She had a secret credit card in your name from 3 years ago. She opened it when she was living with you. Intercepted the mail. She maxed it out and hid the bills. But I found letters from collection agencies. Identity theft, I breathed. And I found a letter from Sterling, Dax added. From Sterling? Yeah. He paid off the card for her. The note said, I handled this one. But you have to be careful. If Aurelia sees this on her credit report, we're both screwed. Stick to the plan. 2 more years and we take everything. 2 more years. The timeline matched the private investigator emails perfectly. Sterling had conspired with my sister to steal my identity and my assets while I was putting a roof over her head. Dax, I said, my voice thick. Can you bring me that box? I'm already in my truck, he said. When Dax handed me the box, I felt the final lock click into place. This wasn't just fraud. This was a premeditated, malicious, predatory conspiracy. I looked at the handwritten note from Sterling. 2 more years and we take everything. I locked the note in my safe. Thank you, Dax. Nail them to the wall, Aurelia, he said with a grim smile. Oh, I plan to. I'm going to give them the show of a lifetime. The day before the wedding, I did something incredibly reckless. I went to see Kaylin. I knew I shouldn't. Silas had advised against it. But I was a mother first, a vengeful ex-wife second. I had to give him one last chance to get off the sinking ship. I waited outside his new Tribeca penthouse bought by Sterling with embezzled corporate funds. At 11 a.m., Kaylin stumbled out, looking horribly hungover, wearing designer sunglasses and a t-shirt that cost more than my first car. Kaylin, I called out. His face hardened when he saw me. Mom? What are you doing here? Are you stalking me now? I'm not stalking you. I'm trying to save you. I don't need saving, he snapped, walking toward his Porsche. I'm doing great. Dad just put me in charge of the entire Southern portfolio. Kaylin, listen to me, I said, blocking his path. Your father is lying to you. The company is insolvent. He is stealing money to fund this lifestyle. He is using you as a human shield. When the IRS and the FBI come, and they will come, your name is going to be on the documents as a VP. Kaylin laughed. It was a hollow, fragile sound. You're just jealous. You're jealous because Dad won, and you're a nobody. Are you living in some dump in Brooklyn? Yeah, Dad told me. I am living in reality, I said, my voice urgent. Kaylin, please. Do not go to the wedding tomorrow. Tell them you're sick. Go stay with a friend. Do not stand next to him when it happens. When what happens? He challenged, stepping closer. Are you gonna crash it? Are you gonna make a scene? Jesus. Mom, you are so pathetic. Dad said you'd try to ruin it. He called me pathetic. I felt a surge of rage, but I swallowed it down. Kaylin, look at me. I raised you. I know you. This isn't you. You are kind. You are smart. You are not a thief. I'm not a thief, he yelled, his face flushing red. I'm a businessman, like Dad. Dad is a con artist, I yelled back. And Serafina is a parasite. And if you stay with them, you are going down with them. Kaylin stared at me. Then he pulled out his phone. I'm calling the doorman. Get away from me. He got into his car and revved the engine. As he peeled out of the driveway, He rolled down the window and screamed, "Don't come tomorrow, Mom! Nobody wants you there. You are the past." I watched him drive away. My heart broke all over again. But this time, the break was clean. I had tried. I had offered my hand. He slapped it away. He was on his own now. I went back to the apartment. Silas was waiting with the final arrangements. "How did it go?" he asked, though he could clearly read the answer on my face. "He's completely brainwashed," I said flatly. "Then he learns the hard way," Silas said. "Are you ready for tomorrow? We have the access codes to the hotel's AV system. The FBI has been briefed. Special Agent Callahan will be waiting in the lobby at 8 p.m. sharp." Silas handed me a garment bag. "Then you'll need this." I unzipped it. Inside was not a dress for a desperate, crazy ex-wife. It was a sleek, custom-tailored, pitch-black Yves Saint Laurent tuxedo. Powerful, elegant, unforgiving. "Put your armor on, Aurelia," Silas said. "Tomorrow, you aren't the victim. You are the executioner." I touched the cold, smooth fabric. "Thank you, Silas." "Get some rest," he said. "Tomorrow is going to be a very long night." I didn't rest. I sat by the window, staring at the Manhattan skyline. I thought about Sterling and Serafina, probably rehearsing their vows, probably laughing about how they got away with it all. 2 more years and we take everything. They wouldn't get 2 years. They wouldn't even get 2 days. Tomorrow, the new Mr. and Mrs. Croft were going to have a very different kind of reception. The morning of the wedding, the sky was overcast. A perfect, gloomy New York day for a funeral. I spent the morning reviewing the presentation. We had the timing down to the second. It would initiate right after the multi-million-dollar love story video montage Serafina had commissioned. At 6 p.m., the guests began arriving at the Street Regis. I watched through a live feed from the cameras Silas had hacked into. He owned a minority stake in the hotel group, so access was child's play. It was grotesquely opulent. The room was dripping in crystals and thousands of imported pink roses. There was a massive ice sculpture of Sterling and Serafina intertwined. I saw my mother, Corinne, greeting guests. She was wearing a champagne-colored gown that was entirely too young for her. She was beaming, looking like she had just won the lottery. "Isn't it wonderful?" I heard her say to a confused relative on the audio feed. "They are absolute soulmates." "Aurelia?" Oh. Poor Aurelia couldn't handle Sterling's success. She's at a wellness retreat, taking some time for herself. I saw Sterling. He looked nervous but triumphant, shaking hands, playing the benevolent king. And Serafina. She walked in wearing a custom Vera Wang gown covered in diamonds. Diamonds paid for by my company. She looked stunning, I had to admit. Stunning and rotten to the core. The ceremony began. I listened as they exchanged vows. "I promise to be your partner in all things," Sterling said, gazing deeply into Serafina's eyes. "I promise to support your dreams and spend my life making you happy." "I do," Serafina simpered. I sat in my hotel room upstairs, sipping black coffee. "Lies," I whispered to the monitor. "Every single word." "Are we ready?" Silas asked, checking his Patek Philippe watch. "Signal is green," the tech confirmed over the comms. "We can hijack the feed whenever you give the word." "Not yet," I said. "Wait until the toasts. Wait until everyone is seated and looking at the screens." The reception kicked into high gear. The Dom Perignon flowed freely. Sterling stood up to give his speech. "I want to thank you all for being here," he boomed, holding Serafina's hand. "It's been a long road to finding true happiness. Sometimes, you have to make hard choices to find your true destiny." The crowd applauded politely, though I could see several uncomfortable glances. Everyone in that room knew about the scandal. They just didn't care as long as the bar was open. "And to my new wife, Serafina," Sterling continued, "you are my inspiration, my rock, my everything." My phone buzzed. It was time. "Now," I said. Down in the ballroom, the lights dimmed for the video montage. A melancholic, romantic pop song started playing. Photos of Sterling and Serafina on yachts, in Paris, on beaches flashed across the massive LED screens behind the head table. The crowd awed. I stood up, adjusting the lapels of my YSL tuxedo. I walked out of the room and headed for the elevators. "Showtime," Silas said, falling into step beside me. In the elevator, I watched the numbers tick down. 10, 9, 8. My heart wasn't racing anymore. It beat slow and heavy, like a war drum. The doors opened on the lobby level. Special Agent Callahan and 4 armed FBI agents in windbreakers were waiting. "Mrs. Croft," Callahan said, "we have the federal warrants. We move when you're ready." "Give me 5 minutes," I said. "I want them to see it before the cuffs go on." "Understood." I walked toward the grand mahogany doors of the ballroom. The private security guard Sterling hired to keep me out stepped forward. "Excuse me, ma'am. This is a private event." Silas Hawthorne stepped out from behind me. "And I am a minority owner of this property. Step aside, or you'll be looking for new jobs in the morning." The guards hesitated, recognized Silas, and immediately backed down. I pushed open the double doors. Inside, the music was just reaching its crescendo. The video showed Sterling and Serafina kissing in front of the Eiffel Tower. And then, the screen violently flickered. The romantic music cut out with a harsh screech of audio feedback. The room plunged into stunned silence. On the giant screens, the kissing photo vanished. It was replaced by a stark Excel spreadsheet. Red numbers. And then, a credit card statement. Name: Serafina Vance. Address: my address. Purchase: Cartier diamond bracelet, $15,000. Paid from Vanguard Pinnacle corporate account. Murmurs erupted through the crowd. "What is this?" Serafina stood up, panicking. "Sterling, fix it! Turn it off! Cut the feed!" Sterling screamed at the sound booth, but the tech in the booth was Silas's guy. He didn't cut it. He cranked the volume. And then, my pre-recorded voice echoed through the massive concert speakers. "Hello, Sterling. Hello, Serafina. You wanted a family reunion. You wanted everyone to witness your union. Well, let's show them exactly what built it." Every head in the room snapped, not to the screens, but to the back of the room. The silence in the grand ballroom was absolute. 300 pairs of eyes locked onto me as I walked down the center aisle. My heels clicked with a steady, lethal rhythm against the marble floor. The sharp black tuxedo made me look like a shadow, parting a sea of pink flowers. Sterling froze at the head table. All the blood drained from his face. Serafina clutched a napkin to her chest, her jaw hanging open. My mother, Corinne, looked like she was going into cardiac arrest. "Aurelia," Sterling whispered into his hot mic, his voice trembling. "What are you doing?" I didn't stop until I reached the center of the dance floor, directly in front of the head table. I looked up at them. The people who used to be my whole world were now just small, terrified figures on a stage. "I'm here to give a toast," I said, my unamplified voice cutting clearly through the dead silence. I held up a small remote clicker. I pressed it. The screens changed again. This time, it was the email chain with the private investigator. "Sterling, try harder or make it up. I can't afford to give her half." The crowd gasped. I could see the investors, the men Sterling needed to survive, leaning in, whispering furiously to each other. "Turn it off!" Sterling roared, lunging toward the DJ booth. "Security!" "Sit down, Sterling," Silas Hawthorne's voice echoed from the entrance. "Unless you want to add assault to your list of federal felonies." Sterling froze. He saw Silas. He saw the FBI agents waiting in the shadows by the exits. This is fake!" Serafina shrieked, tears ruining her perfect makeup. "She's jealous. She hacked the system. She's crazy." I clicked the remote again. A new document appeared. The fraudulent commercial loan application for the Hudson Yards project. Complete with the forged signature. "Is forging federal bank documents crazy, Serafina?" I asked calmly. "Is wire fraud crazy? Because that carries a mandatory minimum sentence. And guess whose name is on the LLC that received the stolen funds?" I clicked again. "Serafina Zenith, LLC. Sole proprietor, Serafina Vance." I pointed at her. "You weren't just the mistress. You were the mule. Sterling used you to launder $3 million. Did he tell you that? Did he tell you that when the feds come knocking, they'll be looking at your signature?" Serafina whipped her head to look at Sterling, her eyes wide with terror. "Sterling, You said it was tax optimization. You said it was legal. Shut up, Serafina, Sterling hissed. Oh, don't stop her, I smiled coldly. Let her explain. Let her explain to our mother what you really think of her. Click. An email appeared on screen. Subject: The Old Bat. Sterling. Just write another check to Corinne from the slush fund. The old bat is greedy. As long as we pay for her condo, she'll keep Aurelia in the dark. She'd sell her own daughter out for a kitchen renovation budget. Corinne let out a sound that was half sob, half choke. She stood up, her hands shaking so violently she dropped her champagne glass. It shattered on the floor. Sterling, you called me that? After everything I did for you? I took your side. I betrayed my own flesh and blood for you. And what did you get for it, Mom? I asked, looking at her with nothing but pity. A front row seat to a crime scene. Sterling looked around the room, his eyes wild. He was watching his empire collapse in real time. He saw the investors standing up to leave. He saw the waiters stop pouring and stare. He saw the end. You signed the settlement, he screamed, a final, desperate grasp at control. You signed it. You gave it all up. You can't touch the company. Section 14, subsection B, I said simply. The poison pill. You commit a felony, the deal is void. And everything the houses, the company, the assets reverts back to me. Sterling's knees gave out. He collapsed back into his chair. And Kaylin, I said, shifting my gaze to my son, who was sitting at the far end of the table, looking paler than a ghost. He was staring in horror at the screen, which now displayed his own text messages. VP? Seriously? Okay, I'm in. You wanted to be a businessman, Kaylin? I said softly. Well, here is your first lesson. Choose your partners carefully. I clicked the remote one last time. A video started playing. It was security footage from the Vanguard corporate garage, dated 2 days ago. Sterling and Serafina were arguing by his car. Sterling on video. As soon as we secure the Hawthorne money, we drop the kid. Kaylin is dead weight. He's a moron. We leave him holding the bag with the IRS and take the jet to Monaco. He's too stupid to even realize it. Total, crushing silence blanketed the room. Kaylin slowly stood up. He looked at his father. The hero worship in his eyes was gone, replaced by a devastating, world-shattering realization. Dad, Kaylin whispered. You were going to frame me? Kaylin, no, I was stressed. That's out of context. You called me a moron, Kaylin said, his voice cracking. Sit down, Kaylin, Sterling commanded, trying to regain authority. Don't listen to her. Kaylin didn't sit down. He picked up his full glass of red wine and threw it directly into Sterling's face. I hate you, Kaylin screamed. I hate you! Chaos erupted. Corinne was sobbing hysterically. Serafina was hyperventilating. Sterling was wiping wine off his face, looking like a drenched, cornered rat. I lowered the remote. The presentation was over. I nodded to Special Agent Callahan. The FBI agents flooded the room. The guests parted like the Red Sea. Sterling Croft, Callahan announced, flashing his badge. You are under arrest for federal bank fraud, wire fraud, and embezzlement. Serafina Vance, another agent said, grabbing my sister's arm. You are under arrest for conspiracy and money laundering. No! Serafina shrieked as the steel cuffs clicked around her wrists. I didn't know. I'm just his fiancé. He made me do it. You can tell that to the federal judge, ma'am, the agent said, dragging her away. Sterling didn't scream. He just stared at me. As the agents pulled his arms behind his back, his eyes locked with mine. You destroyed everything, he spat. You vicious, vindictive bitch. I walked closer to him. I stood so close I could smell the fear sweating out of his pores. I didn't destroy anything, Sterling, I said, my voice as calm as a frozen lake. I just turned on the lights. You were the cockroach that got caught. They hauled them away. The wedding guests stood in stunned silence. The only sound was Corinne's weeping. I looked at the head table one last time. The cake was untouched. The flowers were perfect. The illusion was dead. I turned to Silas Hawthorne. I believe my work here is done. Magnificent, Silas said, offering me his arm. Truly magnificent. As we walked out, I didn't look back at my sobbing mother or my shattered son. Not yet. They had made their beds. Tonight, they had to lie in them. The days following the wedding were a media circus. The New York Post ran with the cover, "Catch me at the altar. Tycoon arrested before Idos." I gave no interviews. I let the indictments speak for themselves. I moved back into the Greenwich estate 3 days later, after the feds cleared the crime scene tape. It felt strange walking back into the rooms I had designed. Serafina's trash was everywhere: tacky fast fashion clothes, trashy magazines, half-empty bottles of cheap Prosecco. I hired a hazmat cleaning crew. "Throw it all away," I told them. "Anything that isn't mine, burn it. Replace the mattresses. I want her DNA scrubbed from my life." Sterling was denied bail. The judge deemed him a flight risk because of the Monaco video. He sat in a cell at the Metropolitan Correctional Center, his Tom Ford suits replaced by a neon orange jumpsuit. Serafina made bail, paid for by Corinne, who had cashed out her retirement savings to get her precious daughter out. But Serafina wasn't free. She was facing 5 to 10 years in federal prison. Her face was plastered all over page 6 as the ultimate gold digger who dug too deep. A week later, my mother showed up at the estate gates. She looked 10 years older. Her hair was a mess. Her eyes were swollen. She stood at the intercom, trembling. "Aurelia." Her voice cracked through the speaker. "Corinne," I said, refusing to call her mom. "You can say what you need to say from out there." She sobbed. "Aurelia, please be reasonable. Serafina is terrified. She's just a girl. She didn't know what she was doing. Sterling manipulated her." "Serafina is 41 years old," I said coldly. "She knew she was sleeping with my husband. She knew she was spending my money. She signed the LLC papers." "She is your sister!" Corinne wailed, her grief curdling into that familiar toxic guilt trip. "You cannot let her go to federal prison. You have to drop the charges. Tell the U.S. attorney it was a misunderstanding." "It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a felony." "If you do this," Corinne hissed, "you are no longer my daughter. You ruined this family." I laughed. It was a light, genuinely free sound. "Corinne, you ruined this family 20 years ago when you decided she was the princess and I was the help. You didn't come here to apologize. You came here to ask me to fix it again. You want me to be the scapegoat one more time so she can walk free. She is a criminal. And you are an accomplice. I saw the checks Sterling wrote you. Consulting fees. You took blood money to gaslight me." Corinne went dead silent. "I'm not pressing charges against you, Corinne," I said. "Not because I love you, but because I don't want the embarrassment of my own mother's mugshot in the papers. But you are dead to me. Do not call me. Do not come here. If you need money, ask Serafina. Oh, wait. She's bankrupt." I cut the intercom. I watched on the security cameras as she stood there, pounding on the iron gates, screaming my name. Then, her shoulders slumped, and she walked away. It hurt. Of course it hurt. But it was the kind of pain you feel when pulling a massive splinter out of infected skin-sharp agony, followed by immense relief. Then, there was Kalen. He didn't call. He didn't come by. I knew he was couch-surfing with fraternity brothers because the feds had seized the Tribeca penthouse and the Porsche. I waited. I knew he had to come to me on his own terms. 2 weeks later, he showed up at the Vanguard corporate offices. He looked awful. He had lost weight. He was wearing old jeans and a plain t-shirt. No designer sunglasses. No arrogance. "Mom?" he asked from the doorway of my corner office. I looked up from my desk. "Hello, Kalen." He walked in and sat in the chair opposite me. He stared at his hands. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I was so stupid. He made me feel important. He said it was better than college. He said you were holding me back. And you believed him because it was easier than doing the actual work," I said, my tone gentle but firm. "Yeah," he admitted, a tear slipping down his cheek. "I saw the video. He called me a moron. He was going to leave me for the IRS. I have nothing, Mom." He wiped his eyes. "They took the car. I have zero money. I need help." I looked at my son. Every maternal instinct in my body screamed to hug him, to write him a check and make it all better. But I was the architect now. And you don't build a strong structure on a cracked foundation. I love you, Kaylin, I said. But I am not giving you a single dime. He looked up, horrified. But where am I going to live? I don't know. You're going to have to figure that out. Mom, please. Here is the deal, I said, sliding 2 pieces of paper across the desk. This is a student loan application. And this is an employment contract for the mailroom here at Vanguard. Minimum wage. You start at the bottom. You finish your degree at night. The mailroom? He asked, stunned. I was a VP. You were a pawn, I corrected. Take it or leave it. If you want to be a man, Kaylin, you have to earn it. Sterling gave you things to buy you. I am offering you nothing, so you can build yourself. He looked at the papers. He looked at me, seeing the absolute, unyielding resolve in my eyes. Slowly, his hand reached out and picked up the pen. Okay, he said, his voice shaking. I'll take the job. Good, I said. Go see Sarah in HR. She'll get you a badge. Don't be late for your shift. He stood up. He looked at me, really looked at me for the first time in years. You're actually kind of terrifying, Mom, he said, a trace of genuine awe in his voice. I smiled. I know. Now get to work. The trials were brief. The evidence was overwhelming. Sterling Croft pled guilty to avoid a 20-year sentence. He got 8 years in federal prison at FCI Otisville, plus massive restitution. He looked pale, aged, and utterly broken in the courtroom. He never once looked at me. Serafina took a plea deal. 3 years in a minimum security facility in Danbury. She bawled as the judge banged the gavel, looking back at Corinne in the gallery and screaming, Mom, do something. But there was nothing Corinne could do. Corinne was living in a studio apartment in Queens on Social Security. Her allowance gone, her pride shattered. I sat in the back row, wearing my sharp black suit. I watched justice being served. I didn't feel joy. I felt peace. The scales were finally balanced. Epilogue. 1 year later, I was standing in my office, 40 stories above Manhattan. The frosted glass behind me read, Vance and Hawthorne Real Estate Partners. Sleek, silver, and slate blue. Not a trace of rose gold in sight. The company was thriving. We had just broken ground on the Hudson Yards project with Silas. It was going to be a mixed-use development, luxury condos. Yes, but also subsidized affordable housing and a community center. My phone buzzed. A text from Kaylin. Kaylin, hey Mom, just aced my macroeconomics midterm. Looks like an A. Also, the mailroom team improved sorting efficiency by 15% this week. Do I get a raise? I smiled and typed back. Don't push it. But dinner at 8. My treat. Kaylin was working hard. He was tired, he was broke, and he was humble. And I had never been prouder of him. He was becoming the man I always knew he could be, not the caricature his father tried to mold. There was a knock on my door. Come in. Silas Hawthorne walked in carrying 2 glasses and a bottle of vintage champagne. Happy anniversary, he said. To the day you burned the circus down. Feels like a lifetime ago, I said, taking a glass. You know, Silas leaned against my desk. Sterling sent me a letter from prison. Wanted to know if I'd buy out his shares in an old defunct shell company. Guy needs commissary money for ramen. What did you tell him? I told him I only do business with the CEO, Silas grinned. And the CEO is busy building an empire. We clinked glasses. I looked out over the New York skyline. I had lost a husband. I had lost a sister. I had lost a mother. But I had found myself. I was no longer the scapegoat. I was no longer the doormat. I was no longer the invisible wife. I am Aurelia Vance, the architect. And my life, finally, is entirely my own.